I'd like to invite Guillermo. Thank you for participating and sharing your knowledge within the field of product line engineering. I know you have a lot of background in this field, so I'll let you give it that little historic expose and where you're working on at today.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. Well, I'm currently working for AIRBUS here in Europe, mostly on the central engineering role. So I'm working with the commercial aircraft division, defense and space, excuse me, and helicopters division. So like Tom said, I have quite a few years of experience in product line engineering. I'm still not tired of the topic. I think it has still huge potential, as I hope I will demonstrate and stimulate your curiosity on product lines. I'm founder also of the one of the working groups of INCOSE Tom was talking about product lines, and also of the automotive group. So I hope you enjoyed the talk. So you tell me, Tom, when we get on with it.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing now and you take over.
Okay, here we go. So once again, this is probably one of my favorite topics, along with systems engineering. So I usually tend to talk a lot and share a lot of things live. So not everything that I will say will be in the slides, but if there's something that's not clear, please post it on the Q&A. We'll provide enough time, I guess, for Q&A.
Yes.
So like I said, today I have a double role in AIRBUS. I'm the head of multidisciplinary analysis and optimization. That is all the techniques that we use for finding, architecture, balanced architecture, and then optimizing solutions. And I also have my other hat of chief architect of value stream around product line engineering, which is really on its way, as I will tell you a little bit later. So what I propose to you today is reframing a little what we mean about product line engineering. If you go into the internet or try to take a look at literature, you will probably find as many definitions as different authors, and most of them focus on the very technical aspects of it. I will give you a broader image of what it takes to put product line in place. I wanted to share with you a couple of things in particular. First, the situation in industry in general, so it won't take too long. And the return of experience I've had for about nearly 20 years, actually. I know I look young, but I'm a little bit older than what I look. So this is some sort of list of considerations for you to think about implementing PLE in an effective manner. I'll make a focus on feature-based and model-based product line engineering, and then I'll give you some closing remarks to summarize all of this, and then Q&A. So if that's okay for you, we can get started with what we mean for by product line engineering. So first of all, product line engineering is usually seen as an engineering method only. And as you will see, this is far beyond a purely engineering method. The purpose of product line engineering is really to improve your business. And this in product line engineering, you will do by maximizing the benefits of smart reuse strategies. And every word in this sentence is important, but in particular, the two last ones. It's a smart way of reusing things. I'll come back to that in a minute. So what we are going to try to do is really confer to an organization a clear vision of customer needs, or put in other ways, what we want to propose to a given customer segment or a given customer market. And on one side, and on the other side, efficient capabilities to adapt the products of this organization to customer needs. This, as you might think, should naturally lead to a greater performance and more successful results overall. But this is just enticing as a title, I will give you a little bit more hints on what's going on in real life. So if there's one reason to go into product line engineering, is because you need to improve something. You need to improve something on the way you're conducting your own business today. If everything's okay, if you're leading the market, if you're not threatened by any sort of external actors, then probably you don't need to improve much, you know. But let me give you a little bit more details on that one. So for us in particular, who work in call for tender types of markets, that is authorities or government agencies or government related agencies that have a need for a given type of systems, usually make a call for tender, and then we as providers give an answer and try to match the best we can to those needs. What usually happens in this type of industries is that every project, every customer project is handled as a separate siloed effort. So you have big teams working on one solution, and then if you have the chance to have another contract coming, you would set up another team that would work on another solution for another customer. And up to, I don't know, probably the golden years right after World War II, this was the way to do business, and it worked pretty well for many companies. The problem today is that we have to answer to many different types of, let's call them specific needs in different markets, because not everybody has the same need. And the thing that's becoming counterproductive for many of these type of industries is doing specific things all the time. So the reuse capabilities, the reuse capacity between one solution and the other is very hard to attain. So the idea in product line is moving from this way of conducting business as usual, many large silo type specific product developments, and put your efforts into what we call a product line approach or a product program that develops a product line. This is usually more cost effective, provided a couple of details I'll talk about in a minute. The idea is that if you imagine that you are able to define something that satisfies not just one customer, but again, an ensemble of customers within a given market, you could probably just imagine configuring this large solution to specific needs from one same source. And the idea is that these customer projects should be shorter and more cost-effective efforts instead of, conducting projects that last for many, many years. So, and the time to market is always almost irreducible. You have to think about this too. So this is the big idea behind product line engineering, this programmatic, different programmatic management. For those of you who are in more mass market type of markets, this is what you typically would do. You do not design an automobile for one person. You design it for several people, and you have different means to go about it and be successful. So let me tell you a little bit more what I've learned. I've had the fortune to work in the automotive industry, in the railway industry, in the aerospace and defense sector for many, many years, also in the energy sector, by the way. And this is what I found as common observations in all these places I've been. First of all, some examples. What do people say about product line engineering? There are many studies, well, not that huge volume, but there are some of them out there. I'm just giving you some sort of results from different types of actors. For example, General Motors, who announced a 10-to-1 time saving to generate the electrical architecture of a vehicle from a vehicle family architecture. My ex-colleagues from Thales Alenia Space, they did improve, because I know because I was there, did improve by 85% the time it took to them to produce the complete documentation to answer to a call for tender, for instance. Alstom Rolling Stock, also a known history in the past, they we were able to reduce in a ratio of 12:1 the time to produce a complete requirement database for a customer project. That is from the time they receive the customer specification to the time the train, that was where I was working, the whole requirements for the train are made. And recently also in Thales, my ex-colleagues from ground radars, this was a spectacular reduction. They needed 11 months of expert time and brain and investment to calibrate over all the parameters they needed for a specific usage of a ground radar in the defense sector most of the time. And they were able to do this, to reduce that to 4 hours. I don't think I have the time to explain that, but I think there's some publications out there that talk about it. To 4 hours to generate these calibration parameters with the types of techniques I'm going to talk about. And then you have some more, even more spectacular announcements from some of our competitors or providers sometimes, General Dynamics or Lockheed. And you see the figures that are announced there are, might be a little bit mind-boggling. Now, it's not about the amount that I want to emphasize here. It's that these figures were not published by General Dynamics or Lockheed Martin. They were published by their customer. So when you try to have, when you want to have this type of return, the customer speaking for you, I think you've done something right. And all of this is done according to the publications, thanks to a product line approach. One of the things that I want to stress also is that even in the defense sector, the days where, you know, you just earn a contract and you could run it for several years, and if you had a couple of months delay in your delivery, there was no big issue. I think those times are starting to be over now, even in the US. This is one of the quotes from the DoD back in 2018, but the politics of the DoD have stayed most the same. They really want to transition to a culture of performance and affordability. And if I remember well what was said, it was that the US Navy, for instance, cannot just stand waiting 2 years to have a vessel upgraded. This is in the current world that we are living, in the changing world that we are living, this was becoming more and more unaffordable and unacceptable for the US military. So they are trying to change the game. And one of the things that contributes to this is how do you define, how do you design a product, or the product line in our case, that is able to adapt in time more easily. This is also one of the benefits of product line engineering. Now, this all sounds very good. Now, what people do not say is what I'm going to share with you right now. So how do I do this? How do I get there? Well, if I resume that in one single phrase, is that you have to define and adopt a common delivery approach with smart reuse strategies. Now, the problem is that just like systems thinking, or just like common sense, I guess, product line engineering is not a natural act for many people. A lot of people are used to doing their thing, optimizing their thing, and then hand it over to the next guy, and then the engineering process takes some sort of form. But actually, if you have to do it again, you would do it again, you know, especially in the types of markets we are evolving. So what does this mean? In a couple of words, it means that you really have to think about the evolution of your product within its whole life cycle. In our cases, these life cycles can be very long, anywhere from 20 to 30 years. So there should be a way to define at strategic level the orientations and the priorities that you want to put for product lines. How do you want to attack a market? How are you going to differentiate yourselves from your competition? And this has to be reviewed periodically depending on the context. Mass market type of industries usually do this every now and then. The types of industries we are working on do that not in a very structured way most of the time. And this is something that can be improved. And then at operational level, you also have to manage each stage of the product line life cycle, from the concept exploration to the retirement of these things. And this is done via decision reviews. Usually what happens is that you have a very project-oriented mindset in large companies. So like I said at the beginning, you have one delivery, one contract, you concentrate on that one, and that's it. And if you have to do the next one, if you win another one, then you would do the same type of effort. So there's really no economy, let's say, on accumulated cost on on the engineering side in particular, when you are doing this. What it also takes is actually something that's usually not communicated, not even in the use cases that you will find in most of the time in literature, is that it takes a complete transformation of a company's business process. I'll come back to that one. It's not just, let's change a little bit the way we conduct our design reviews. Nothing to do with that. Because it really takes a strategic investment with higher benefits in the mid to long terms. So this means that you also have to think about how you are going to incentivize people. Most project managers are incentivized on the result of their project. They are very rarely incentivized on the long-term result of a family of projects that has some sort of return of investment expected on it. The curve that you see here is a very simplistic one. The red zone represents the investment that you would have to make at the beginning when you're setting up a product line. The continuous line represents the accumulated costs when you're doing, project by project, business as usual, project after project. And the dotted line represents the cumulative cost when you're in a product line approach. So theory will tell you that once you have instantiated once or twice your product line for a specific customer, you would reach your equilibrium point. From there on, the blue zone in the curve represents the benefits. The curve is valid. I think it's difficult to imagine that you will have all the investment that you would need at the very beginning. Usually it's some sort of year-by-year investment, but it still can be demonstrated that if you maintain the effort in the long term, this is going to be fruitful. And actually, this is what we call an investment. Okay. The other thing that it takes, which is even more difficult than that, is aligning the stars. So imagine that you have a marketing team that has an idea of what should be proposed to the market, which is different from what the project manager has in mind, which is different from what the engineering teams know they can provide given the time and the budget they were allocated. So in many cases, if you are lucky, you might come up with a solution that satisfies some of these stakeholders, but definitely never something that, even though could represent a compromise, satisfies in a better way all of the involved parties in a product line approach. Now, what do you need to do? So this is usually some sort of recipe of the do's and don'ts, in particular in large organizations. Okay, so let me first try to explain what I meant by aligning the stars. The main goal in product line engineering is to define a business strategy for your product line. How do you want to attack the markets again? What are your curves of investments versus revenue versus benefits? How do you position yourself with respect to competitors? What are going to be your differentiators, and so on? So how are you going to attack the market in a way? Ideally, you would do that thinking in modern times, in modern industry today, not only on physical products, but thinking what else can you propose in terms of services? And if you're lucky, you would integrate this into what we have started calling a product service or product service product line. I won't have time to explain that one, but this is probably for the next webinar. So once you have defined this strategy contains a lot of elements that are useful or should be useful for you to set up your engineering effort or your technical effort. For instance, the number of programs or projects you will have to run in parallel, the number of the volume of individual systems or exemplaries that you have to provide, the maturity of your market, of your customers, of your teams. And this will give you elements to set up your product, your technical strategy aligned to your business strategy in different ways. For instance, if you're attacking a market for a first time and you have some brilliant idea that worked for one type of market, you would most probably start attacking this market using a clone and own approach. You know, you copy paste, you tweak here and there the solution so that it matches what you want to do, and so on. On the other side of the slide, you have what we call the concept of a superset platform or 150% platform. We call it 150% because it contains more than what you would need to satisfy one customer, which would be 100%. So your platform can be 120, 130, 160, depending on how much variability you want to integrate into this product. And in the middle, you have two approaches that actually are combined. They do not exist one without the other. You can imagine that you want to think of establishing and defining standard components or standard interfaces. So they are very near. In the second case, in the standard framework or standard architecture, you would rather spend your time trying to define standard interfaces so that any component that is compliant to the standard interface can be used to compose a solution. Now, when do you go to one to another? So I'm just going to give you very quickly the pros and cons. I won't go through that. You will have them. But for instance, if you're in a market in which you always provide a certain number of functionalities, whatever the customer, and this is sort of stable, you would probably want to identify standard components that you would manage in a library to satisfy these functional needs. And you probably would have some others for which technology evolves so quickly that there's no use, or it would be useless to try to anticipate the future in the long term. So you would have some sort of building blocks that would be adaptable in a more in a faster pace. You see, if your customer is mature, if he's willing to accept a product line approach, if your teams understand everything it takes, and if your market is quite stable, meaning that from one customer to the other, there's little difference in what they are expecting in terms of functionality or performance, then the superset platform would be the place to go, because there the reuse is much more substantial than in the other cases. Now, you can go to clone and own. I used to work in the energy industry, and indeed, in the golden days, you probably set up a new energy plant, electric energy plant, every 5 years, probably 10 years, 20 to 30 years now, if really we're in a very dynamic market. So in these cases, you might think, well, is it worth maintaining all my product for 20 years, hoping that somebody will come up with the same need? And in this case, you would always try to, you know, not necessarily start from scratch, but not necessarily reusing everything you used before, especially in terms of technology. There are a couple of warnings when you want to do this, is that if you want to go to clone and own or copy paste, you have to make sure that your teams manage their technical debt at 100% assurance, And second, that they are black belt and eighth dan in configuration management. If these two conditions are not reunited, then you're taking a lot of risks in a clone and known way of working. And this is usually happens to a lot of industries and a lot of organizations. So what we've done up to now, very quickly, is we took some elements of the strategy. We took some of them into consideration to set up the way we are going to conduct the technical business. And the third step, which in my mind is really just common sense, I mean, really not stupid at all, is aligning your organization to how are you going to conduct the business. And this is one of the greatest difficulties I found everywhere I've been. Most of the time people tell me, Guillermo, we are really trying to set up the superset platform, and we believe in this, we are going, but their organization stays the same. So they are organized in large project teams, most of them independent, while they are trying to do the superset platform. And believe me, this doesn't work, and people suffer. Your engineers will work hard, they will have a lot of trouble, because most of the time, the people who have the last word on what's going to be done are the people who get the money into the company. And when you are in our types of company in defense and aerospace, when you have strong project management calling all the shots, then you have very little chance of setting up a product line approach properly. Okay, so this is the resume of what I have observed in general in industry. So what works well? Let me check the time. Some sort of advice what works well. First is to see product line engineering as a breakthrough. It is definitely not, with 20 years look back, it is definitely not a continuous improvement thing. But once you decide you want to go on with this breakthrough, you have to implement it in a very structured step-by-step transition plan. Otherwise, the wall to climb, the task will be too tall for any type of organization. And this is usually a very common mistake. You know, promising the moon and saying, okay, now we have to go to the moon in 6 months, and you don't have the means to go to the moon in 6 months. Okay, because most of your competitors are also doing continuous improvement, right? So you might be better than them at sometimes they might be better than you. And well, this situation won't change radically without a real breakthrough. And I believe that product line engineering is one of these possible breakthroughs. The other thing that works well, actually, this is, in my experience, the only way I've seen things working, is that engineering teams who are responsible of delivering see the interest of product line engineering, but they are in the middle. They are not in the top level management. They are in the execution between execution, between strategy and manufacturing. So what usually happens is that you have a very dynamic, pushy engineering team, and then some sort of middle out approach that starts explaining to everybody what are the pros and cons, what you want to pursue with product line engineering, and then all planets start to connect. This is the way I've seen things working. I have never seen, in my personal experience, a completely top-down approach that says to everybody, we are going to do product lines starting next year. And bottom-up approaches don't work because you don't align the rest of the actors that I talked about previously. It's very difficult. What also works well is formalizing what your product is and is not, using a variability model or a feature model. If you're not familiar with that, we can take probably some time in the Q&A to explain what it is, but it's so simple. that provided that you can read English or German or French or Swedish or whatever, anybody should be able to understand a feature model. And this is some sort of the ontology, the world, the universe of what you will be working with. If something is not in this feature model, it will not exist. It does not exist. So this gives you a very, very easy way of aligning the planets, like I said before. It should be some sort of lingua franca of all actors. And what usually happens is that you are going to capture knowledge in a very simple way. And then you can manage that as an asset. And one of the things that a feature model, which is central to feature-based product line engineering I'll be talking about, is that you can separate concerns, strategy, high-level needs for customers, visible features by customers, and then more technical features that are used by engineering teams to go faster, to automatize some of their tasks. And connecting these two universes while keeping concerns separated is extremely effective. The other thing that works well is tailoring. You know, one of the great difficulties I've met in large organizations is that for some type of top-level management, it would be easier to tell people to do the same thing the same way over and over again. But believe me, it's very different to build a satellite and build and sell a satellite than building and selling a defense system, than building and selling an aircraft, or that building and selling a railway signaling system. It's completely different. Customers are different. Habits in the industry are different. The way of conducting business is different. So you have to take a look on all of these contextual constraints for you to find the better way into product line engineering. And again, this is people who don't do this usually make mistakes because they try to copy what was done. For example, another example, building radars or building defense systems has nothing to do with building and selling cars or cellular phones. Okay, so but when people see a good idea and a good example, say that's exactly what we should be doing, guys. And that's usually not the best way to go about it. Now, there are also things you should avoid. Okay, first of all, once you set up the goals, and even if you convinced a lot of people on going into product line engineering, the first thing to avoid is believing that because you've written down things and because you've communicated about it, everybody will have the same understanding of the purpose, goals, and on the work to be done. These are usually things we simplify a lot, probably humans, but oversimplifying the approach and underestimating the effort is really hampering. Either you promise too much in the short term and you don't talk about the required investments, and then you will deceive people anyway. Okay, you will always have people who are disappointed by the results you are achieving. This is a long-term investment again. Okay. Now, the other thing I just talked about, but I'll repeat it again, is trying to use a one-size-fits-all approach. It's really, really different. Things, context, commercial context, competition context, things are so different in different markets for one same type of product. And between different types of industries, things are so different that trying to implement product line engineering the same way for everybody is counterproductive. The other thing is that maybe you are getting an idea of saying, gosh, this looks nice, but this is a huge task. How long will it take for me to see the benefit? So This usually happens when you don't define your transition plan and say, okay, this year, next year, we're going to take these very first steps to solve this little problem. For instance, we're going to take this little step to spend 10 times less 10 times less time, I'm sorry for that, in setting up my requirements database or my architecture diagrams, because that's where I have the biggest problem. And then the year after, you start building from this. Okay, so what people usually don't do is make an analysis, a very honest analysis on where the biggest pain points are for them, and then trying to see if product line engineering can help solve that. Okay, instead of just, you know, selling the idea. It is a nice idea, product line engineering, but that's not the point. And the last one I already talked about very briefly. It's really not discussing or even not agreeing on the investment that you need to start, on how do you need to maintain this, either on the investment side, but also on the skill side. And one of the things where you will have trouble setting up a product line in your company is if you do not possess, if your company does not possess a good systems engineering capability. Okay, because we are just talking about systems. Okay, this is really a systematic approach. So I hope you're doing fine. I don't have the means to take a look at the discussion thread or the Q&A, but bear with me for 5 more minutes, and I'll give you a hint into feature-based and model-based product line engineering. So what do we do in feature-based or model-based product line engineering, that like the way we are calling it today, is that in the image you see a couple of axes, couple of lines. The vertical line is separating engineering asset management, requirements, plans, models, everything you use to describe your systems, from what you need to describe the variability of your product. And the horizontal line is separating the space where you define everything you need for a product line from the space where you reuse everything that exists in the product line for a given customer project. Okay, so very quickly, let me show you what does it look like. We use a feature model for describing variability, and we call a product configuration the choices that you make to configure a product. If you've bought a car lately and you've done a pre-selection through the internet, you were confronted to this. You know, what type of engine, what definition, is this sporty, is this comfy car, do you want I don't know, high-end speakers, and so on. So you have a certain number of choices that are given to you to configure your product. That's exactly the same principle. And on the right side, you would have on the upper part everything that describes the product line, just like in a typical product, its requirements, its operational needs, its operational architecture, functional architecture, any type of model that you use to describe this, the physical architecture, your bill of materials, anything, and with a lot of different tools connected to the one that is managing variability. So what I'm going to show to you is really how do you go from the upper part where you have set up everything and then using this, and it's very simple. So I'm going to give you an example. Sorry. Just to come back to this, setting up the product line requires an investment who is mostly dominated by imagining how to produce these reusable superset assets. Okay, it's really difficult for somebody who's doing, you know, code. If the code has not been designed to be reused, you would probably just go copy paste, which would be faster. So if you want to put in place this type of approach, you have to transform the assets that you have into reusable assets so that they can satisfy different types of markets or customers. Okay, and this is paramount because you cannot just reuse anything automatically. Okay, that's probably the largest part of the investment that is required. So the image that I'm going to show you here, for those of you who are familiar with requirement management, this will be very straightforward. If not, bear with me for a couple of minutes. So on the left-hand side, I have a feature model that has 2 features. And these features, I'm going to use them to choose to configure my product. On the right-hand side, I have 3 requirements. And you see a relation between my requirements and the features. So this means that if I choose feature 2, I will keep requirement A and C. And besides, I would substitute a value for a given parameter, whatever it is, if I choose F2 on requirement C. But if I don't choose requirement feature F1, then I will not obtain B. So this is actually what happens when you configure your product. You make your choice. For example, I chose F2 here. And when I do what we call a derivation, that means a filtered instance of my product line assets, I obtain only what I want. And there are many different mechanisms for this. You can substitute, you can erase, delete, you can add things, you can allocate values to something. This is very, very powerful. And this is the way things would work. Very simply, you would configure the product that you need for a given customer need, and then you would just let your power computing work for it to produce all the necessary engineering assets that you need to carry on the rest of the development. So it's huge improvements on the engineering side of things. And I think we have a little bit more than 10 minutes for Q&A. Tom? Closing remarks?
Yeah.
Very quickly. You really need a shared definition of understanding of the product line approach. It's impossible to come up with a good idea if it's not understood by everybody, to put it simply. And then you need to think of the context in which you are evolving, your business context, your competition, the landscape, everything you need to know to say, okay, is this adapted to me? Or am I just doing a little part for a given component? Or am I applying it all over the place? And in any case, you will need to define a good transition plan to get there. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I could talk about this for hours, so just stop me, Tom.
Yeah, well, we have this hour, but I mean, certainly we can continue at additional in future. So, and I guess it's okay for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn and so on. So
sure.
Yeah. But let's see. We have a few questions, and I'll take the one from Johanna because she had to leave. Otherwise, I would have let her ask them herself. But I think she wanted really to know. It's one of those, I guess, chicken and egg questions. What is most important? Is it because a lot of people, I guess, start focusing on the product, making more modular, etc., versus the organization. What is your sort of input on this? I mean, yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, I think everybody starts by the technical side, right? Modularizing or doing things. But in retrospect, I think the most important thing is that this way of doing things has to be aligned with the company's strategy. So to me today, the most important thing, the most important success condition would be to have the buy-in and the backup and the steering of top-level management. Otherwise, if you're not aligned with the company's strategy, you will produce things in a better way, but it will not give you all the resources and the budget that you need to set things up anyway. And the other big problem I think, is people.
Mm.
People. I think that's the main obstacle of anything I say, any transformation initiative.
Mm. Yeah. Probably the challenge is to convince the top management, what is it that convinces them if they don't see the value. I mean, if they don't see actually the implementation. So I think it's one of those catch-22 things, right?
Yeah.
But are there? I mean, of course, now you prompted with you started with showing some results from other companies, and then I think that's of course gives a lot of good backup and rationale why to do this. But is there anything else that you can sort of point at that has caught the company management's attention, if you like, to go this way? And
Yeah, I don't know how to say it.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
Fear. You see, because even us, we are today in a very comfortable situation, as you might know, regarding our competition. Uh, but nobody knows what the future will be made of. And for example, even if we would like to come up with the completely different concept of an airplane or whatever, or of an helicopter, um, today we have no means to say, can we imagine the future and set up this product to be adapted, to be adaptable to whatever comes up in the future? This usually works too. It depends on the management, but usually saying, uh, because our immediate future looks comfortable, 1, 2, 3 year span, we have absolutely no guarantee that this will be the case in 3 or 4 year or 5 year span. So we better start preparing things right now. That usually also works, and also, like you said, I heard that our competition is doing this. Maybe we should think about it. That also works sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Johan Tegler, I mean, you have two questions. Maybe you want to put at least one of those to direct it to Guillermo.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for a good, interesting presentation. And half of the first question is answered by this reference slide, but do you have some recommendation around books and what they are doing in the software systems, like Google with DevOps and things like that?
Yeah, I think recent books, I haven't seen that many specifically on talking about product lines, but a lot of references on software reuse. Historically, everything that has been done by Carnegie Mellon, very, very, but it's very specific to software. Okay, and by the way, software has its own very powerful mechanisms for reuse. Now, if you're a pure software company, that might be enough. If you are working on integrating software into other types of platforms, and then what you sell is the platform, things might look a little bit different. And if you are, like in our case, selling a little bit more complex systems that have to fly and do not fall down, then things are still a little bit more different. There's a very good introduction to feature-based product line, a document that was made by the product line engineering working group of INCOSE. It's called feature-based PLE feature-based primer. It's available, I think, it's one of the product that's available, I think, for everybody. I'm not sure about that, Tom. You have to correct me.
Yeah, the primer is but then there's also the more extensive handbook, right? Or the
the handbook is okay, but it dated very quickly. I went through it again, and we published it in 2012, I guess, or I don't know, maybe more than 5 years, and it dated very quickly because of all the new technologies we have available now. So it might be a good introduction, but that one probably needs a refresh. The primer is okay. The primer is good starting point.
Yeah.
And then you also have the ISO standards. I think I put them in the references there.
Yeah.
Be careful with those. In particular, the 26550, which dates a little too, and was mainly made by academia guys. So it talks about the principle, but it wasn't really made on the state of the art of the practice, which we are still building, you know.
Okay,
Good, thanks.
thank you. Well, maybe we have time for one more question. And then Marcus, you have a question? You want to post it?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm working with people from that is very into lean and knowledge-based development, and our old 10-year-old at least corporate development process talks about these concepts all the time. And they have this thing where they have the knowledge value stream, which is supposed to be where all the knowledge is stored and then reused for individual products in different projects. But no one seems to get that. So you basically have a big repository, a bunch of files. That's the knowledge value repository implementation. So I'm just starting to map these two worlds together, that it seems like for me that feature-based product line engineering is then the taking knowledge-based development and the knowledge value stream, the reusable repository of knowledge about the product with regards to requirements, architecture, design, analysis, everything, right? And then you can instance. Are you aware of these terms, and have you seen any success in applying this as a explanation model for an old school company that knows lean and knows knowledge-based development, but you need to drag them into the 21st century with new terms and new concepts? Yeah,
very good question. Very good question. So yes, actually, this was one of the things I started to work in my previous company. We had a little trouble understanding the two worlds, because one, vocabulary, and the other one, the approach. So while we were trying to do the best we could to make the best product, we really were talking about different things. So first of all, knowledge management in this lean, agile approach, whatever you want to call it, should, in my mind, that was one of the discussions I had with my colleagues, should be better structured, because we were not talking about the same thing. We were talking about reusing technical assets, you know, capturing knowledge of what we want to do with the product, but they should be talking about how do you reuse decision-based knowledge to better answer the questions that you still have. And in a product line approach, you will have a bunch of questions, you know. And this approach to say we combine them both, but we are talking about different things.
Yes.
When you set up a product line, maybe you don't have that much knowledge on your competition or on newcomers. Then you have to identify this as a knowledge gap and do investigation on it. And this is where lean methods are very, very powerful and useful. But it's more, to me, on the decision making and the setting up of the strategy of the product line, which is useful. That's the first part. The second part, it was that every time I talked to many of my agile and lean colleagues, I had the impression they were starting from scratch all the time. Let's do a concept paper. I said, but wait, guys, the product exists. It has its product plan. It has a strategy. It has reusable assets. So how do you use agile and lean on a product line environment where the product line is set up? Otherwise, people will always reinvent the wheel again and again. I don't have the answer to that one. Okay, but that was one of the main difficulties that I had. What do you do when you already have something that has value and can be reused? How do you combine both? So I'm sorry, I answered you with a question.
Yeah. But maybe that's a good topic to continue at the forthcoming webinar. So I really like to thank you, Guillermo. And let me, before we finish, let me just will show you what's happening next. I think, John, you also know Sarah Sherd. So she will be up next on the 14th of December. She wrote one of these legendary papers in '96 about the 12 roles of systems engineering. Now she's been doing some thinking over the years, and she's going to present some new roles. So that's going to be interesting, and we'll have a discussion around that one. So I'm looking forward to meeting you all then. And then last but not least, thank you so much, Guillermo, for this excellent overview of product line engineering. And I think hopefully you've caught a lot of interest and a lot of sort of ideas here to both introduce PLE, but also to, I mean, because I guess this is still a field that is in the evolution, right? So
right.
Whoever would like to contribute, there is this. How about the working group, by the way? Is that up and running, or is it
up and running? I'm going to the international workshop next January to give it a little bit more dynamics, because we've been slowing down.
Okay.
So yeah, it exists. Do go and take a look, and don't hesitate to contact me directly. It was a pleasure, Tom, really.
Well, thank you so much, and for the rest of you, have a very good evening or afternoon wherever you're based, and enjoy the nice weather out there, right? In the dark. And take it easy on if you're biking home, because it's at least here in Stockholm it was very slippery this morning. But yeah.
Okay, take care, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you all again soon.
See you.
Bye. Bye.